All right. Good evening, everyone. All right. Are we live?
We are live.
Thank you. Good evening and welcome to the November 2nd Community Advisory Council meeting. My name is Lorena Barrera and I'm the elected vice chair. I want to thank everyone for taking the time to be here with us. If anyone would like Spanish translation, please raise your hand. Si alguien necesita traducción en español, por favor suba la mano. If anyone raises their hand, let me just check to see if anyone has raised their hand. Doesn't look like we have any hands raised at this time. So, but if anyone does raise their hand, please know to select the globe at the bottom of your screen and select the Spanish language button. Por favor, oprima el globo que está abajo en su pantalla, escoja español y la traducción empezará. Okay, in our agenda, so I'm going to try to do this as good as Evan usually runs this, so bear with me. I'm a little bit nervous. So on the agenda, you will see public comment. Members of the public are free to address the CAC. Public comments should fall under the subject matter jurisdiction of the CAC, as noted in the founding documents. They're also time limited and apply only to action items. Action items are specified on the agenda. Time limitations are at the discretion of the director and chair and may be adjusted to accommodate all speakers. Oral public comment on agenda action items is available during CAC meetings. The public is also invited to communicate with IOLERO staff and CAC members through email. Members of the public who would like to make statements that may exceed the time limits for public comment, suggest topics to be placed on future agendas, or suggest questions to be raised and discussed by CAC members or staff may send an email addressing these matters to law.enforcement.auditor@sonoma-county.org. CAC members may not deliberate or take action on items not on the agenda and generally may only listen. Should CAC members wish to deliberate on an issue raised during public comment, that issue may be placed on a future agenda of the CAC for discussion and possible action. Materials related to an item on this agenda submitted to the CAC after distribution of the agenda packet are available for public inspection in the IOLERO office. The CAC has adopted a design team alliance. All are encouraged to engage in respectful, non-disruptive communication that supports freedom of speech and values diversity of opinion. Our design team alliance is a list of norms which describe the way the CAC wants to show up and be in community while modeling collaborative behavior. We request that CAC members, staff, and the public follow the CAC's agreed upon design team alliance, which is to be tough on topic, not on people, respect others' perspective, respect time, practice active listening, be open-minded, speak to others as you would like to be spoken to, honor freedom of speech, and call each other in. For tonight's meeting, we also want to address public comment and ensure we all have a shared understanding. Public comment on items on the agenda and items not on the agenda, but within the subject matter jurisdiction of IOLERO and the CAC will be accepted. Please state your name and who you represent if that's applicable. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes at the discretion of the CAC based on the number of comments and any other factors. Okay, now we will move on to formal business items. So we'll start with the roll call. So I'm gonna call out the names of our CAC members. First I have Councilmember Dora Barrera. Are you here?
Present.
Councilmember David Hernandez.
Present, yeah.
Thank you. Councilmember Jose Landaverde.
Present.
Councilmember Lorez Bailey is absent. Chair Evan Zelig is also not present, and I am Vice Chair Lorena Barrera. Okay, thank you, everyone. Now, okay, sorry. Oh, Councilmember Alma Roman Diaz. Are you here?
She's going to be late
Oh,
tonight.
she's going to be late. Sorry about that. Okay, so moving on. We need to approve the minutes from last month's meeting. May I have a motion to approve the minutes from one of our council members, please?
I, Dora Barrera, move to approve the minutes.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second?
I second that. Jose Landaverde.
Thank you. And all in favor of approving the minutes, please raise your hand so that Melanie can get a note of that. Okay, and if anyone needs to abstain, if you're not present, please note that. Otherwise, the minutes are approved. Regarding the annual report that was presented last month by Director Kathleen Navarro, it was presented to the Board of Supervisors and it was very well received. If anyone would like a copy mailed to them, please reach out to the Iolera office and one will be mailed to you. They're available in English and Spanish. Again, regarding Spanish translation, if you need Spanish translation, please raise your hand. Si alguien necesita traducción en español, por favor suba la mano. And I'm just gonna check really quick. You don't have any raised hands. Okay, moving on to the next agenda item, ad hoc reports. So our de-escalation ad hoc, I'm giving the report. Team SSU has been doing a lot of research on body-worn camera footage in preparation for this meeting. And they've also completed all of the research on de-escalation policies for counties in California. One of the findings is as most of the counties use the same techniques, even though the counties may differ and the procedures are also the same. And the trainings are adopted through the Lexipol protocols. There are some that have a different model. So the de-escalation is going to use those that are different and then provide a recommendation to, or draft a recommendation from those other models. And that's all we have to report for this meeting. I have Councilmember Landaverde. Can you please provide the report for your ad hoc?
Definitely, we are working on compliance, and the three areas that we have focused on and are canine, taser, and firearms. And we are waiting for this month. We're going to begin writing recommendations for that. And we'll continue to, review and research all the findings as to also provided by SSU. That's it on the report out.
Okay, thank you. Now we're going to move on to agenda item 4, which is the procedures and policies for posting body-worn camera footage online. This is going to be a discussion, and we have representatives from the Sonoma County Sheriff's Office, Axon, and the Civilian Office of Police Accountability. I'm going to read the bios for each of our guests, and then we will allow Lieutenant Brandon Cutting to provide a presentation, and then our other panelists will have approximately 5 minutes each to explain their role and what they do in relation to this subject matter. So first off, Lieutenant Brandon Cutting is with the Sonoma County Sheriff's Office. He has been with the Sheriff's Office since 2005, serving in a variety of roles from patrol to investigations. He currently manages a professional standards unit, which includes internal affairs training, policy review, use of force review, and is a sheriff office liaison for the Independent Office of Law Enforcement Review and Outreach. Regina Holloway is a VP of Community Impact at Axon, where she engages the community and incorporates community concerns into Axon's product design and services. Prior to joining Axon, Regina was a senior program manager at the policing project at New York University School of Law, where she helped to implement the neighborhood policing initiative in the city of Chicago. The outpouring of that initiative was the development of a group of community ambassadors who work with the police to solve problems and increase public safety. Prior to joining the policing project, Regina served as a supervising investigator with the Civilian Office of Police Accountability in Chicago. There, she supervised a major case squad which investigated officer-involved shootings. She began her legal career as a clinical fellow at Suffolk University Law School, where she developed housing discrimination investigations. That work led to the publication of a study on housing discrimination experienced by trans and gender nonconforming residents in the Boston area. The study was published in Yale Law School's Journal of Law and Feminism. Thereafter, Regina practiced criminal defense in the Boston District Courts, where she worked as a bar advocate for Suffolk. I don't know if I'm saying that right, so my apologies. Suffolk Lawyers for Justice. Regina is a senior Atlantic Fellow for Racial Equity through a partnership between Columbia University and the Nelson Mandela Foundation. She holds a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science and African American Studies from Temple University and earned her JD from Suffolk University Law School. Sydney Roberts is a Chief Administrator for the Chicago Civilian Office of Police Accountability, otherwise known as Coppa. In this capacity, she leads the city's civilian police oversight body with full administrative investigative authority of all officer-involved shootings, deaths in custody, or a result of police action, as well as all complaints of excessive force, illegal research and seizure, domestic violence, denial of counsel, coercion, and sex and race-based verbal abuse. Chief Roberts has over 30 years of experience in community advocacy, law enforcement, and public integrity. Immediately prior to joining Coppa, Chief Roberts served as director of the Illinois Secretary of State Department of Police. There, she oversaw the operation of all Secretary of State investigative districts, as well as the security and protection of the Illinois State Capitol Complex. Chief Roberts also served as a commander of the Maywood Police Department in Illinois and was a lieutenant in the New Jersey Essex County Prosecutor's Office. In both capacities, Chief Roberts spent most of her tenure investigating police misconduct and other public integrity breaches. In sum, Chief Roberts' law enforcement career spans just over 20 years. In addition to her tenure in law enforcement, Chief Roberts spent more than 10 years leading administrative and compliance investigations involving fraud, waste, and mismanagement and abuse by government employees, officials, and vendors. Leadership positions included First Deputy Inspector General for the Illinois Office of Executive for the Illinois Department of Human Services. Early in her professional career, Chief Roberts worked as an advocate, first on behalf of low-risk offenders facing pretrial detention, and then for victims of crime. Roberts is an ethics instructor, a former polygraph examiner, and graduate of both the FBI National Academy and its Law Enforcement Executive Development Seminar. Robert holds a Bachelor of Science from the University of Delaware and Master of Science in Criminology from the University of Oxford, England, and a JD from Rutgers School of Law, Newark, New Jersey. Andrea Kirsten, Chief of Investigative, sorry, I don't know if it was
Andrea is not here today.
Oh, she's not here. Okay, sorry about that. Ephraim, am I pronouncing that correctly?
I'll take it tonight.
How do you pronounce it?
Ephraim.
Ephraim, sorry about that. Okay. Ephraim Edie was born and raised in the city of Chicago and is a graduate of Northern Illinois University with a BA degree in journalism, where he also played Division I basketball. After completing his college experience, Ephraim returned to Chicago and began his grassroots efforts as Director of Community Programs for the People's Community Development Association of Chicago, developing job training programs, case management strategies, and employment opportunities for hard-to-employ residents for the city of Chicago. In 2004, he began working with the Safer Foundation, one of the largest nonprofit organizations in the country, exclusively serving people with criminal records, as manager of faith and community programs. While at Safer Foundation, he provided oversight of the Ready for Work Prisoner Reentry Initiative, a national model funded by the United States Department of Labor's Employment and Training Administration. Ephraim began working for Chicago Public Schools in 2011, the third largest school district in the country, where he provided direction to over 150 faith and community-based organizations impacting thousands of children and families around the city on behalf of the district. Currently, Ephraim serves on the Public Information Officer and Chief spokesperson for the Civilian Office of Police Accountability, with direct oversight over public and news affairs, as well as community engagement, and is committed to building trust in civilian police oversight. Thank you all for being here. Those were really, really good biographies. We're very happy to have you. So we're gonna go ahead and allow Lieutenant Cutting to provide his presentation, and then we'll proceed and allow each of you to speak for about 5 minutes each before we have a discussion between the council members, and then open up an opportunity for the public to provide public comment. Okay, thank you. So I believe now Lieutenant Brandon Cutting will share his screen and provide his presentation.
I don't have actually a screen to share. My name is Brandon Cutting with the Sheriff's Office. And what I would like to talk about, and I know we're going to get varying aspects on what videos get posted. My perspective that I'm going to provide tonight is, once the decision has been made to provide a video, what does it take for us as the Sheriff's Office to put those videos out? Not necessarily the decision factors in whether or not to release a video. Those decisions are made between the laws and the Sheriff's Office. The sheriff himself gets involved in those. And I know Carleen has been working with the sheriff on those issues, and there's obviously some other potential bills or measures on the ballot for that. So what I wanted to talk about was, what does it take once we get the approval to post a video or to put a video public? What are we doing to it? And so talking about redaction. In addition to written documents, we also have to do redactions on body-worn cameras, on the audio and the video portions of those. And essentially what we're trying to do, we're trying to follow a government code and the privacy rights of the people who get captured on those body-worn cameras. Completely depends on the nature, the time of day, the location, the number of people that are present, the number of deputies that are present, whether it's in custody or out of custody on the street, the number of body-worn cameras that are running. I don't know if everyone here is aware, but our body-worn camera requires that all law enforcement contacts on the street be recorded by our body-worn camera. We are activating those body-worn cameras on, if it's a self-initiated contact, on contact, if it's a dispatched call, on arrival, and then they run for the duration. So some of those body-worn cameras can be lengthy in time and capture a lot of information, some of which we have to remove. The law sort of state, well, the law does state that we will try to do our best to redact anything that would violate someone's privacy, who is either a witness or a complainant in a call. We will try to remove any images that are inappropriate. And in doing that, what we use is a software that blurs or distorts the images that are contained that we don't want to be there. The problem with doing that is we have to do it in a very careful way, because the law also says that we cannot interfere with anyone's ability to comprehend what's going on by our blurring. So a lot of times it's very detailed work. Right now, currently at the Sheriff's Office, we have 2 deputy sheriffs that go through and do the redaction through a software. We are working on training additional records personnel to be able to go through that and do that process. We have had a significant backlog since the beginning of January of this year in trying to come into, so when 1421 passed, trying to ensure that all the videos that were requested from prior cases get out there. So we've been doing a lot of work on that. Our redaction team requires that one person do the initial redaction, and then a secondary person comes back in and reviews all of the video redaction that was completed. And they compare it to the original as well. And they try to make sure that first, all the redactions that need to be removed have been. They also try to make sure that the essence of the video is not compromised. And so that whoever's watching it gets the initial, they're able to comprehend the whole event as the video initially portrayed. So it's a very detailed process. On an average video, so an average contact of a use of force, a single deputy's video for approximately every 15 minutes of video requires about an hour of redaction time, and that includes the review time. So for extensive contacts where there's multiple deputies, obviously a significant amount of time goes into that. Priorities on what we are doing our redactions on currently are any significant or serious bodily injury or death involving a deputy. We have a time limitation of 45 days to release those videos. We have to spend a great deal of time on those. Usually those incidents require multiple deputies' videos. Use of force videos, if they're involved in a complaint or they're involved in a legal proceeding, some of those are released, some of those are not, depending on the cases. And then we also have to work through with the district attorney's office before we actually make that release. So once we've completed our redactions, then we also work through with the DA's office. The process is getting better. It is a newer process for us, the sheriff's office, and there is limiting guidelines into how we do it as far as what we remove. We have followed the most substantial laws on it, which are mostly protecting the privacy of the uninvolved innocent victims that are involved in the videos, and try to protect the privacy of other people that may have been passing by. That, again, as I said, is a fairly intensive process. As an example, right now, I started in this role on July 1st of this year. Since I started in this role doing use of force videos, I've reviewed approximately 128 use of force reports, which include body worn cameras from every deputy that was involved in those calls. So those alone would be a significant amount of redaction, and we are not currently doing redaction on those videos because we are not posting all of our use of force videos at this time. I don't have a lot else to specifically talk about as far as the redactions go. If anybody has any questions for me as to how we do it or how many we are doing or any of that process, I'm happy to talk about it. And we're just trying to make sure that everybody understands the redaction portion of the videos.
Okay, thank you. Next, we'll move on to Chief Roberts. Would you like to start us off? We'll go for about 5 minutes and then move on to the next panelist before we start our discussion.
Certainly, thank you. And I hit my timer because I want to make sure that I don't talk too long and then allow enough time for some questions. So in the city of Chicago, in a lot of ways, we're very similar to Sonoma Sheriff's Department in that we, with the exception that we do have a policy that governs what materials and what incidents qualify for release. So under the city of Chicago's policy, there's 3 types of incidents that will trigger a release, transparency release. And that is an officer involved shooting where the officer intended to hit someone or make contact. Whether they make contact or not does not matter, but it has to be with an intent to make contact with a particular individual. The second incident is a taser discharge that results in death or serious injury. And the third incident is any use of force that results in death or serious injury while an individual is in custody. So any incident that meets that criteria will be subject for a transparency release. Since late 2016, Coppa has released just over 300 use of force incidents during that time period. Now, the policy also identifies the materials that are to be released with each incident, and Chicago's material release is pretty comprehensive. So it's all body-worn camera, relevant body-worn camera, any pod camera, those are city-owned cameras that are on top of light posts, any CTA or any public transportation video, public transit video, third-party video if the owners will allow us to have it. We also release all OEMC radio communication, all car-to-car radio communication, all 911 calls. We also release the arrest report as well as the use of force tactical response report. As the lieutenant mentioned, for all the materials that are subject to release, we have to go through and determine if the materials are relevant. And usually this applies most particularly with respect to video. Relevant video is everything that happens immediately preceding the incident, the use of force incident itself, and the immediate aftermath of that incident. And usually that is when either a person is taken into custody, the yellow or red tape goes around, the crime scene tape goes up, or a person is transported to the hospital. The other thing that we have to do, as the lieutenant mentioned, is to make sure that we redact any personally private information. We have to redact that in all of the mediums that we post. Now, unlike Sonoma, we have 60 days to release the video. That's 60 days from the date of the incident. Now, Coppa makes every attempt to release those materials as quickly as possible. But as I've just mentioned, the materials can be very voluminous. It is not unusual for 100 body-worn cameras to be logged for a particular use of force incident. And as the lieutenant mentioned, we have to go through every single one to determine whether or not it's relevant. And so we have 60 days to do that release. With respect to the manner of our release of materials goes onto Coppa's website. We have a data portal, and that's where we upload all of those materials. They're uploaded by case number. We also, similar to Sonoma, we give the state's attorney and the defense attorney or the federal prosecuting entity the opportunity to review all the materials that we're going to post prior to releasing those materials to make sure that it will not compromise the criminal investigation. And the last thing that we do is we make sure that we notify the impacted individual or their family member and offer them the opportunity for a private viewing. That is one of the things that Ephraim Eady from my office, he takes point on facilitating that. We have found that providing the family the opportunity to review these materials in advance really helps to build trust, build confidence, and it also enables us to establish a relationship with the family. One of the things that I will say is we find quite often that as much as the family wants to see the video, the people that show up often don't review the video, at least not every single person that thought they were going to be ready to look at the video. When they have the opportunity to see it, they don't want to actually see their loved ones take their last breath. One of the other things that we have seen is that while the family might want to see it, they don't want it posted out there for the entire universe to see forever and ever and ever. And so it's been enlightening for us to work with the family, but it just reaffirms the importance of making sure that we give the family the opportunity to review these videos in advance of them being released. I think that's pretty much it in a nutshell. I don't know, Ephraim, did you want to add anything or just hold until we have questions?
Well, just that part of what we also do is a community engagement and obviously providing some context to media. And I know that is a little bit post maybe our discussion today, but it is certainly a very important part to provide some context, not only to media and family members, but also to stakeholders within the community that can kind of give and pass along accurate information so that a video alone, as we all know, I hope we all know, is not telling the entire story, but part of the story. And so part of what we do, even in addition, is we go into high schools and talk with a lot of young people, thousands of young people, and actually not only share that information, but take them through an exercise that involves body-worn camera to really help push that message even further, to help young people understand and not just take their cues from social media.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Ephraim, aside from that, if you do have anything else that you want to add regarding your role or anything?
Well, no, I think it's covered mostly in what Chief Roberts mentioned. So I'll answer some questions if they come.
Okay, thank you. So Ms. Holloway, would you like to take this opportunity to talk for about 5 minutes about this subject matter and how it's tied to what you do?
Sure. So in my role is mostly to bring community voice to our products and services. And so I do that in a few ways, mostly meeting with product teams to discuss how our products serve community or don't, and trying to enhance those features. So as that relates to body-worn cameras, I think my department supports the development of features such as we now have a feature called Priority Ranked Video Audit, which automatically ranks videos for supervisors to review based on keywords that are transcribed from the audio body-worn camera videos, such as offensive language or something that an agency would determine. And as far as policies, we're agnostic to policies, but I would say that what we do is support processes like these, which elevate community voice around body-worn cameras or other products that we develop. So I just want to thank you again for allowing us to be here and speak.
Thank you. So at this time, I'd like to open it up to the council members. If you have any questions or comments that you'd like to address, please take this time to do so. And I believe Carlene asked if you could say a little bit about your role, or I guess something about yourself before you ask your questions. Does anyone want to start us off? Okay, go ahead, Councilmember Landa Verde.
Yeah, thank you all for being here. It's it's nice to have a perspective from not only another state or someone completely in another region in the East Coast. So thank you for taking the time. I don't know what the local time is over there, but I'm assuming you're hungry and you want to get to bed. I just had a couple of questions. When there's redaction, so maybe this was for Mr. Cutting. But does the raw footage still remain saved if there was any litigation that they needed to see everything, just to see that there was no subjective editing, I would say? Does it can it be subpoenaed if you wanted the whole video?
Yes, all of our videos are retained in the Axon system in their original format. When we do the editing, it has to be removed to a secondary system where we do the redactions, and those redactions are saved play by play, so to speak. And they can't, outside of the redactions, they can't be edited or altered in any way. And those redactions are only for public release. The court file, which is the original, is retained in its original format.
Thank you. Thank you. And just a quick question for Chief Roberts. You said that you meet with the families previous to basically releasing the video. Who has the final call on if the video is going to be released? Is that just is between the community? What if it was such a gruesome situation or maybe incriminating that the family didn't want that being out? Does the family have any say on the video not being at all?
So in the city of Chicago, our policy is to release all relevant material with the exception of the acquisition of a court order. In the rarest occasion, we have not released material where we felt the releasing of the material would essentially, it's a legal term, it's called shock the conscience of the observer. That's only happened one time in my tenure, which is a pretty short tenure. I've only been there since late 2018, but and that was when Chicago had a mass shooting at a hospital. It was very, very chaotic. We did end up, and we posted some of the video, but we really, really narrowed it down and only showed a very small portion. The family does not have the option to say, I don't want to. It would have to be something that shocked the conscience, would reveal the identity of a confidential informant and or compromise the criminal prosecution or defense. Those are really the only times. And even when Coppa withheld video because it was just so gruesome and so graphic. And mind you, that piece of the video, it didn't demonstrate an officer's use of force. It was part of the immediate events leading up to the incident. Even in those instances, it was still subject to release through the Freedom of Information Act. So it can still be released. It was just materials we didn't add. And as I said, that's only happened once since I've been here. And as far as I'm concerned, that's the only time where it was really warranted.
Thank you, Chief Roberts.
Thank you.
We have Director Navarro on calling from 707-33, the 331 number, and she has a question, so we're gonna let her speak at this time. Carlene, go ahead.
Hi, thank you everyone for your presentation. I'm having connectivity issues tonight, which has never happened before during one of these meetings. But I had a few questions. I was wondering for any of the panelists, if there's ever been issues that have arisen with individuals that were actually not the subject of an incident, so not defendants or victims, but people who were uninvolved. And if you've ever had any litigation or issues arise or pushback from uninvolved parties when you've posted body-worn camera videos publicly.
So for Coppa, most times if the person is uninvolved, we will, if they're a juvenile, we will blur their image. If it is in a residence, a place where someone could expect a level of privacy, we will blur their image. If they are on a city street where there is not an otherwise expectation of privacy, unless they're a juvenile, we do not blurred their images. And to date, we have not received any suits or complaints that have at least been brought to our attention.
And how long have you had this procedure in place?
Yeah, we have been releasing videos since late 2016.
Could I also respond and I'm probably going to put Chief Roberts or Ephraim on the spot, but I think it may be interesting for them to learn why Coppa's ordinance and why this release policy comes about, which is the death of Laquan McDonald and the uproar in the city. So if either Chief Roberts or Ephraim could speak to that, I think it would give more context to why it's so important to have these policies.
Thank you, Regina. And that was part of my original opening remarks, but I didn't want to run out of time. So Ephraim, I'm going to turn that over to you. Do you mind taking that one? Thank you.
No problem. Well, back in 2014, in the city of Chicago, there was a very tragic event that happened, and that was the death of Laquan McDonald, who was a young African-American male who was walking down the street, had a knife, and although he was a ways distance from officers, there was an officer, Jason Van Dyke, who arrived on the scene after other officers were already present, and within a matter of seconds shot and killed Laquan McDonald 16 times. That video was not relevant for 13 months. And so even though there was knowledge of this in-car camera that captured the incident, it was really without any legitimate reason. It was not released. And so after 13 months, it finally was released and caused a significant uproar in the city of Chicago and a lot of civil unrest, and honestly initiated a lot of the reform that we see happening here in the city of Chicago today was based on that incident. And so Coppa is now in the city of Chicago. The unfortunate death of Laquan McDonald has now been the benefit of considerable policy changes, and this video release policy that the city is under, that Chief Roberts explained, is really the cause of a lot of what we see today.
Now, I will add that following that incident and the ultimate release of that video, there was a Department of Justice pattern and practice investigation, followed by the City of Chicago's Police Accountability Task Force investigation, which, as Ephraim mentioned, triggered the creation of Coppa, which is Chicago's third iteration of civilian oversight. Our first body was in 1974. But it also led to the enactment of a federal consent decree, of which Coppa has been under, or the city of Chicago has been under, since 2019. And in its accountability section, Coppa has 88 compliance paragraphs. There are a lot of consent decrees, but not nearly as many are as directive upon the oversight body as the city of Chicago's consent decree is.
Regarding, can I ask a follow-up question? Regarding the case of Laquan McDonald, you said it was so you were able to get those videos posted publicly after 13 months, is that right?
Yes, that was, at that time, the civilian oversight body was a different body, was the Independent Police Review Authority. And there was no city policy for the release of those videos. And so that was just a totally different process. The materials were just released. They were released to the media. And Regina or Ephraim, I'm uncertain, but I don't think those videos are on our portal.
Well, actually, no, because the Inspector General took up that case. So there was no portal really to place it on at that time.
And in that case, and since then, have you run into any issues with, say, the courts, or I know you said you run it by I think you said the district attorney's office, in terms of videos being public, if there are ongoing hearings or trials? Has there been any issues with jurors being contaminated and that kind of issue arising between your office and the courts?
Not to our knowledge. You know, the state's attorney has the ability to get the court order to prevent the release of those videos, as does the defense attorney. And what's surprising is it is something up until this point, and hopefully it continues, where we believe that the court is really making a meaningful assessment about whether or not that video will actually compromise the integrity of the investigation, because there are many instances where the state's attorney or the defense attorney, they're not seeking the release of the video. And what we also know is often in a officer involved shooting that results in a fatality, unless the state's attorney is interested in criminally prosecuting the officer, they're not preventing the release of that video either, and there is no defendant in that case. So more of our videos go up. I mean, we do have a fair number that are delayed pursuant to a court order, but it is a substantial number are released. And when we receive the court order, we put a notice up on our portal where that case number is, and it says that pursuant to a court order, this case is not being released. Or there are times where we'll get a court order that says, we don't want you to release the video, but you can release the arrest report, you can release the tactical report, and you can release 911, or any combination thereof. And that's we appreciate that, again, because they're making a meaningful review of the materials. And it also says that the state's attorney, as well as the defense attorney, they too are committed to transparency.
And I was going to ask.
I'll also add that when we also receive notice when those court orders are lifted, and then we can at that time, even if it's 6 months, a year, or whatever, once we receive that the permission that the court order is lifted, then we'll put it up on our website.
Have you found, I know you haven't had these practices in place for an extremely long time, have you found that it has improved the relationship between your law enforcement agencies and the community, or do you have any way of measuring that? Have you tried at all to, or gotten any sense of if it's had any impact?
Yeah, I'm gonna turn that one over to Ephraim to respond.
Yeah, well, I'll say this, it's difficult to say if it's one thing or a number of things. We do a lot of things as it relates to outreach. But what I will say is that we do talk to every recruit that comes into the Chicago Police Department. We meet with and provide a presentation. And one of the things that we particularly talk about is our releases, not only of video, but also of reports once we conclude our investigations, because those are also placed on our website. And so one of the things that we do, we make sure our officers understand that we are very deliberate in making sure that we follow city policy and what the ordinance speaks to in terms of our requirement to make things transparent, but that we never do it with a narrative, for example, to point in a direction of what the conclusion is going to be, especially when it comes to video releases. So we do try to help officers understand that we're not providing narrative. Any narrative that they may hear is usually media driven. That is not our job. Neither is it our responsibility. Our responsibility is only to place it on the website. Often what happens from there, we have no control over. But I will also say that just our overall engagement and having the conversation, not only with law enforcement officers, but also community, we have seen more trust in Coppa as an agency that will investigate allegations of police misconduct and officer involved shootings, but also with law enforcement in understanding the responsibility that we have and the mandate we have to do certain things. And that in times that we are having investigations where we may exonerate an officer or sustain allegations, that officers can respect the process and understand the process. And we've seen that forge better relations because both can trust Coppa as an independent agency that's not going to be influenced by public perception, media narrative, or political pressure or anything like that, that will be objective and thorough in our investigations and have some integrity throughout the entire process.
I don't want to. I have more questions to follow up with, but I don't want to dominate the conversation. If anyone else has anything first, any other CAC members?
I do. Sorry, I turned off my camera so I don't lose signal. But hi everyone, my name is Dora Barrera. I'm also a CAC member. I am from here in the Springs area in Sonoma, the actual city of Sonoma. But my question is, so Lieutenant Cutting did mention that for every 15 minutes that's released, it's about an hour of video that's redacted. Did I get that right? Or is it an hour of work? An hour of video redacted? I was wondering if you all have that sort of kind of numbers. And I also had one more question, but you can answer that first, if possible.
I think that question was directed, how much time does it take Coppa to redact? So we use several software products to assist us to redact both the audio as well as video and even written documentation. I did just text our data forensic guy to see what that software is, because I thought that question might come up. I haven't gotten that response back, but unfortunately, I know we have software. I don't know the amount of time. What I can tell you is that we get asked a lot, can we release video quicker than the 60-day timeline? And in a way, the answer is yes, because we do. But the one thing that we do in the city of Chicago is we don't do partial releases. So we do a full release. So we have to have enough time to review all of the video and review it for relevancy, as well as review it for redaction purposes, as well as the audio. And so sometimes the redaction and the volume does impact our ability to release earlier than the 60 days. And unfortunately, in the city of Chicago, we don't have an officer involved shooting once every 60 days. So we often have a, I don't want to say a lot, but it's not unusual for us to have, 15 transparencies that are in the queue. Right now we have 4. That's a good number to have. But between May and September, I think we were averaging about 15 videos. So all of that comes into play with how timely we can be in releasing the materials.
My second question is probably a really easy question, but how many staff members do you all have?
So our entire agency, we have an authorized headcount of 150. Right now, we are at one of our lowest staffing levels. I will say we never made full headcount, but right now we're at one of our lowest headcounts, and we're about 115. About 75 to 80 are actual investigators through to supervisors. We have a staff of attorneys, data analysts, policy people, administrative support, executive staff. So we've got a pretty fulsome agency with a full investigative body of investigators, major case specialists, evidence specialists, quality analysts. So we've got a full staff, but I'll also say we've got about 1,800 open cases. We log more than 5,000 complaints a year. Coppa retains about 35% of those complaints. The rest of the complaints are forwarded on to the Bureau of Internal Affairs that handles more procedural violations as well as any criminal offenses. We are an administrative investigative body.
And then one final question. You said that in 2016 is when you started releasing body-worn cameras.
Yes.
That policy that was put into place, can you say a little bit about how it was created, like who took part in creating it, and has it changed? Has it been revised?
Your timing is quite interesting. As I mentioned, following the death of Quan McDonald, there was Department of Justice report, as well as then Mayor Rahm Emanuel impaneled a police accountability task force. The chairperson of that task force is now the mayor of the city of Chicago, but part of their review was to develop a city transparency release policy. And that is the policy that exists to this day. It was enacted in late 16 or early 2017. And we are currently, right now, at this very moment, reviewing the policy to assess opportunities to enhance and or amend our policy. We can actually share that with you. I think Ephraim may have it. He may be able to, if not, send it.
Sharing it right now, actually.
Okay. Yeah, so each of you should get a copy of that policy momentarily.
Well, thank you for your time. I've really appreciated learning from you all.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I will turn off my camera again. I don't want to lose signal.
Okay, we have Council Member Alma Roman Diaz. She's driving right now, but she would like to ask if officers have the discretion to turn cameras on and off, or is it mandatory, or what's like the general process?
So Chicago's policy is very much like Sonoma, as mentioned by Lieutenant Cutting. If an officer is going to a call for service and knows that he's going to encounter a member of the public, they are to activate their body-worn camera upon an awareness that they're going to a call for service. If they are engaged in proactive policing, when they encounter the individual, they are supposed to activate that body-worn camera, and that their camera is to stay on until the duration of the incident. There is no discretion to turn on or turn off. They do have to obviously let the person know that they are being recorded. The failure to activate can be subject to discipline. Coppa particularly has made several, has done at least 2 advisories on the failure to activate body-worn camera. And a lot of times there is the failure to activate. What we do have more often than that is late activation, and the consequences of late activation, 2-minute buffer period. And so, you know, if we're in a use of force incident, a lot of times, depending on when that officer, how soon after the incident the officer activated the body-worn camera, we may not capture the shooting itself, nor will we capture any of the dialogue or the discussion between the officer and the individual before the shooting. So failure and or late activation are big concerns for us. The only time that an officer does not have to activate is if, and I'm sure Lieutenant Cutting, I'm sure they have the same situation, if an emergent situation happens and an officer does not have time to activate. I can tell you we are in the midst of doing another advisory, a more in-depth advisory to the police department. And one of the things that we have found through over almost 200 interviews of officers, that it's not the situation that they were in an emergent situation. Either they just forgot or they somehow were not aware that the situation required activation. In a very, very small number of cases, their response was they were unfamiliar with the technology.
I just wanted to, if I could add something really quickly. Every city has different cameras depending on what contract that they have, but Axon's body-worn cameras do have the capability to turn on when sirens go on,
Yep.
when a taser or a gun is deployed. So that is a feature that is available depending on the city's contract or what they've decided to purchase.
And to that point, I believe that Chicago is transitioning to some variation of that. I don't know if they're going all the way to the immediate activation with all of them being they pull the taser and the gun, or if the lights go on. To Regina's points, there are a couple of different products, but I know that Chicago is transitioning into an enhanced activation process.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else from the council have any questions that you would like to ask?
Yeah, David Hernandez.
Yeah.
Good evening. Hey, I have a couple notes, and one of them was about activation of the body camera. You kind of covered, but I also thought that the volume of people's voices and keywords could come into play on that. Also, the software you spoke about, that it blurs faces for privacy. Does that software automatically kick in and blur faces without being done manually?
Again, I apologize. I'm unfamiliar with how the software actually works. We can, at a later date, have somebody reach out to you guys and to talk to you about the software that we do use. But I do apologize. I think, Ephraim, are you raising your hand?
I can give a little bit of an answer because sometimes I'm in the room as some of these redactions are being done, so that can help explain it to the media. But often it is something that is manually placed and then kind of recorded with our technician moving that, kind of creating that that person or that area as a locator. And then as the video runs, it'll stay with the person as they are moving throughout the incident.
Okay, so my second part of that would be, are there any non-law enforcement people that get to view the raw data, the raw video?
Yes. So in Chicago, when we release the video, one, it goes on to our portal. All materials that we collect, all video, all the audio, is subject to being released. The only thing that we would have to redact would be private protected information. So for instance, if the body worn picks up a vehicle, if they're pursuing a vehicle and we've got the body worn camera that shows the vehicle, we have to, by law, redact the license plate because the license plate is attached to an address. Or if we're showing video from a doorbell security camera, if that security camera can pick up the address of the house across the street, then we have to release that. And so all of the materials, whether we post or not, they are eligible to be released pursuant to a Freedom of Information request, but there's certain redactions that have to occur by law.
Right. Yeah, I understand that. I think the point I was trying to get to is there not a trusted civilian group that could view the non-redacted raw videos to make an assessment about the legitimacy of your redactions?
Sure. So I guess I should have mentioned this. Chicago, my office, the Chicago Civilian Office of Police Accountability, we are all civilians. We are an independent, nonpartisan government agency. We are not sworn. We don't have the power of arrest. We don't carry guns. We're not current law enforcement officers. Our backgrounds are lawyers, community activists, investigators, former police officers, lots of attorneys, policy analysts. That is our background. We're from all communities within the city of Chicago. Chicago has 77 neighborhoods, and we are represented in almost all 77 neighborhoods. We're of all ages, ethnicity, races, but we are that civilian body that is reviewing the evidence. We are that civilian body that is investigating members of the Chicago Police Department to determine whether or not their law enforcement actions were aligned with department policy. And if they're not aligned with department policy, we make a finding that the investigation determines that they were not aligned with policy. And then in that instance, we have the ability to recommend any level of discipline up to and including termination. If the police department disagrees with our discipline recommendation, they have to send a letter to us. They have to tell us that they disagree with it. We then can look at it and say, yeah, you know what? We should reduce our discipline, or no, we don't agree. We believe that discipline should stand. In that instance, our recommendation, along with the department's recommendation, goes to a member of the police board, and the police board becomes the ultimate arbitrator of whether or not Coppa's disciplinary recommendation will stand or the department's recommendation. And if our recommendation stands, then the discipline process proceeds.
Well, thank you very much. And thank you for being with us.
Thank you, David. I appreciate it.
Thank you for those questions. I wanted to ask if there are, what are your personal well, I guess if you'd like to share your viewpoints on having the ability to post the footage on your website, and do you think it's more beneficial, or at times maybe it creates more problems? I know you said that it has helped with community trust and with the relationship with law enforcement, but what do you think? Are there things that need to be fixed, or what do you have to say about that?
I guess I can be
Lieutenant, do
brief.
you want to? Okay.
I think one of the things that we have learned over this past, especially since Coppa's existence of 3 years now, is that it is hard to satisfy when there is so much distrust. The 60-day policy that we are currently operating under, I mean, it was being celebrated when it was first put in place, something that was applauded greatly. And then as unfortunately more incidents that have happened, most recently George Floyd, 60 days almost seems to be no longer suffice. People want it quicker, they want it faster, they want more. And so while it is always our agency's effort to meet people where they are, understand the public's perception sometimes of things, the distrust is just so deep that video releases alone won't fix it. One case being resolved or investigated and our findings, whether they are upheld or not, is not going to fix it. It's really going to take a police reform that is more of the marathon, and it's going to take that community engagement component, not only community engagement with civilians, but also with law enforcement over time, that is really going to bring kind of everyone to that place of trust. And we understand it in the city of Chicago, why there is distrust. We understand the long path that is ahead, and we're willing every day to chip away at it. And we have seen some successes that we've learned to celebrate the small victories, but we do understand that the distrust is just so deep. Chicago has been in civilian oversight for over 40 years now. And so the distrust is not something that just began. It was happening back in the 70s, and obviously as recent as Laquan McDonald. So we understand it, and we just try to do our part, which we still believe is significant.
Thank you. Go ahead, Curly.
I have one last question. I know you sent us, Ephraim, a copy of your proposed modified ordinance, I think it is. And I'm just wondering if you could discuss very briefly whether it proposes to go beyond officer-involved shootings and use of tasers, incidents with great bodily injury, et cetera, that were described at the beginning of the meeting.
I'll let Chief Roberts answer that, but I just want to make clear, what we sent was the video release policy, the city's policy,
Okay.
as it stands right now. But
Right,
Chief Roberts. do some
I
of the-
see, thank you.
Yeah, and our policy does extend beyond officer-involved shootings, as well as tasers. It is that last piece, that use of force that results in death or great bodily harm while in custody. We've taken a very broad view of while in custody as to include attempts to apprehend. And so a motor vehicle pursuit that results in death or great bodily harm, we will post that. If there is an officer-involved use of force, whether it's a baton or some other force that results in great bodily harm while that officer was attempting to apprehend another person, those will get posted. That happens significantly less often because our great bodily harm is a pretty high bar for us. It is something that requires an actual hospital stay, but they have been released. And that's how we've really gotten to the 300 number of releases. The number of officer-involved shootings in motor vehicles in the last 3 years is certainly not 300, or rather 4 years is not 300. It is some of those other uses of force.
Okay, so it sounds like it covers use of force generally up to and including great bodily injury, but not any use of force.
No, and it actually starts at great bodily harm. So that's the threshold.
Okay.
Great bodily harm up to death.
Death, right.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I do have one final question, maybe for Lieutenant Carino or Chief Roberts. Is there any type of, I don't even know what the proper way of saying it, maybe quality assurance, where you would just, right now we're talking about maybe high profile cases where there was bodily harm, where there was excessive force. What about just a run of the mill arrest, just to see if officers are basically doing what they're supposed to do, just to check out, just to see if everything is being copacetic according to policy? Or are you just concentrated on the ones that basically are the media's after? I mean, am I making sense?
I can answer. I think you're asking if a use of force, general use of force, would rate a public release. Are you asking, do we review those? Just for clarification.
No, my question is, do you review any recordings from when the officer's on scene? That doesn't necessarily have to be of high profile, just a regular, police stop, just to see if the officers are doing what they're supposed to do. And so maybe for training, and we don't basically are not being reactive, but we're using them more as of a training tool, or the supervising officers looking at these footages.
Yeah, so I'll speak to the Sonoma County Sheriff's Office. Yes, we have a policy in place. And as I said, just since July 1st till now, I've reviewed 128 use of force video reports as a whole. A lot more videos than that because that's every deputy's video. So every supervisor, anytime there's a use of force, and our use of force is anything above standard handcuffing. So if force is used in the handcuffing, it's a use of force report, and all the way up to obviously, if there's a critical incident, it's a whole different factor, but every use of force is reviewed. All body worn camera is reviewed by the supervisor and myself as a professional standards lieutenant. And then we flag it if there's any issues.
The city of Chicago is very similar again. So at the Chicago Police Department, Every use of force incident is reviewed by the Force Investigation Division. If during their review of that use of force, if the Force Investigation Division observes something that is not in compliance with department policy, or they're uncertain, that will trigger a report to Coppa. Coppa would then open an investigation and investigate that officer at that time for an improper use of force or excessive force, which would involve the body worn camera, as well as any interviewing, reviewing any documents, and that would result in a full-on report. The Chicago Police Department, the sergeants and the lieutenants, there is a system by which they do periodic reviews of officers' body worn cameras. Chicago has over 13,000 police officers, so I don't think every individual, every officer's body worn camera is reviewed at the end of every night, but there is some auditing of that. That too can trigger an a referral to Coppa for an investigation. But then, as I mentioned, or I didn't mention, Chicago, Coppa, our investigative jurisdiction is limited. It is limited to all officer-involved shootings, all taser discharges, all deaths in custody, motor vehicle pursuits that result in death and great bodily harm, and then excessive force, domestic violence, improper use, improper search and seizure, verbal abuse that is bias in nature, denial of counsel, and coercion. So many of our investigative complaints require us to review body worn camera to help support the investigation. In many ways, body worn camera, and I will say this, body worn camera exonerates an officer in far more instances than it does determine that the officer engaged in improper procedures. And I will say that is how it is supposed to go, because police officers are supposed to be following department policy. But body worn camera is a big part of our investigative efforts. If during the course of our investigation, when we're looking at body worn camera, if other violations arise, that too could trigger a investigation. What Coppa doesn't do is, we don't have the authority to just fish in body worn camera world. We do use Axon body worn camera. Once it's logged into this evidence.com that Axon manages. We can't just go into, any officer's body worn camera and just see what they've been doing. That would be a violation of our departmental rules, of our ethics. So I hope I answered that question.
No, you both answered it very well. Thank you.
We have one more question from one of our council members, and she just wants to know, how do you get your funding for your department? How is that approved?
So one of the things that came out of the Police Accountability Task Force was greater independence in the Civilian Office of Police Accountability. And that greater independence comes from the chief administrator being appointed by the mayor, but must be confirmed by city council and is subject to a 4-year term and can only be removed for cause during that time. The other was a dedicated funding source. So the Civilian Office of Police Accountability receives 1% of has to have a minimum of 1% of the Chicago Police Department's budget. So our budget is $18 million.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much. So I think if there aren't any other council members who have questions at this time, or if Director Navarro, do you have any other questions you'd like to ask? If not, maybe we'll just move on to public comment. Is that okay? Okay, perfect. So for public comment, we have a few minutes left. So depending on how many people raise their hand, we'll determine if we need to shorten the time. But remember to please state your name and who you represent, if that's applicable. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes or less at the discretion of the CAC based on the number of comments and other factors. Remember our commitment to civil engagement. Everyone is encouraged to engage in respectful communication that supports freedom of speech and values diversity of opinion. And with that, we'll go ahead and move to our first speaker, and we have Kathleen Finnegan. So Evan's really good at doing this. I'm gonna try my best to record the time. So we only have 3 hands raised at this time, so I'm gonna proceed with 3 minutes. And let me just start my timer. So if I could have Kathleen unmuted, please. And then once you begin speaking, I'll go ahead and start the timer now.
Thank you. I have a clarifying question, and I hope it's possible for Lieutenant Cutting to answer. It had to do with the handcuffing issue being the criterion for whether or not it's. I got confused about that. It sounded to me as though it's only from handcuffing, after handcuffing and onward, that it's considered to be use of force, or that's should be reviewed, or am I totally just confused?
Did you have any other questions you wanted to add? Otherwise, we'll stop your time and then allow him to speak.
Well, I'd like to, depending on his answer, I may wish to continue with my, a comment or something.
Okay. I'll pause. So I'll pause the time. You took up 58 seconds, and I'll allow Lieutenant Cutting to proceed.
Thank you.
So no, it doesn't begin with handcuffing. Any force used on a person that's considered to be above and beyond reasonable handcuffing. So if I had to use a control hold on you, that would be a use of force that we would be flagged on as a use of force review. And what I use handcuffing is just handcuffing a person is not considered in and of itself a use of force. Anything above and beyond that, any force that's used in any part of the contact is reported and flagged and tracked and reviewed.
Okay, that helps a lot, if I may, because I'm aware of some cases where someone has been shot and actually killed on the spot and handcuffed after death. And so that wouldn't, that would just kind of blow the whole situation open. So I misunderstood, and I thank you very much for clarification.
So I started the timer again once you began speaking. Kathleen, do you have any other questions? You have 1 minute and 35 seconds left.
No, I'll see at the time.
Okay, thank you. Our next speaker is Bernice Espinosa.
Hi, I hope you can hear me. My name is Bernice Espinosa. I'm formerly a public defender here in Sonoma County. And I have a few questions for Coppa. I apologize that I'm not able to write them in the chat. So hopefully you'll be able to remember them. Coppa seems to only be for the city and not for the county in the same way that the Sonoma County Sheriff is. And I'm assuming that the city is more populous than the entire county of Sonoma. I'm wondering if what the number of incidents a month that come into you for review. And then does the city have its own jail? And if it does have its own jail, are videos activated during transport? They are not activated during transport here in Sonoma County. There was some discussion regarding going through the process of communicating with the district attorneys and defense counsel. Defense counsel does have the ability to have all body-worn cameras as part of our discovery. However, what is very unique, and I don't know what the Illinois discovery rules are, but here in Sonoma County, we actually, as defense attorneys, have to sign a document as part of our memorandum of understanding that we will not release the videos, and essentially giving up our clients' right in order to be able to have their rap sheets, their police reports, and the other things that are associated with that. Is there any kind of similar agreement with your district attorneys? How much involvement does the district attorney have in whether or not something can be released? And the last question is actually for Deputy Cutting. If use of force reports are created at the point that someone is being cuffed, how come those documents are not released as part of discovery? Thank you.
Sorry about that. I was not able to unmute myself, but that got fixed. So I think what we'll do, since those were a lot of questions, this meeting is being recorded. So if the panelists have responses, we can share those as a follow-up. And because this isn't a Q&A kind of meeting, sorry about that. So, but we will try to get answers to your questions and provide those at a later time. So Bernice, since you said you cannot put anything in the chat, and I don't see that as an option, maybe you can email your contact information so that we can send you those answers after this meeting. Our next speaker is Omar Bass. So if he could be unmuted, please. And let me just start my timer 1 second. Okay, I'm ready. Go ahead.
Okay, just making sure you can hear me.
Yes.
Hi, Omar Paz. I'm one of the founding members of the Community Local Law Enforcement Task Force that happened in 2014-15. I guess I wanted to take like a little bit of a higher level question to kind of the issue of mental health in regards to this specific topic. I think one of the things that humanizes this the most, and one of the issues that I'm personally afraid of, and that's been coming to light both in the public consciousness and for first responders and law enforcement, and even more other examples in the military, referencing the Department of Defense and specifically drone operators, not to compare those two things with what the work is being done locally, but I guess what this might be a follow-up question, but if anything, I hope this is a well-taken comment. I guess for both the accountability perspective and then the internal perspective of law enforcement, I guess I was hoping if there's any answers to what precautions are taken to avoid the stress and burnout of constant review of these hours and hours of footage, and mainly for the point of avoiding desensitization, but also for just making sure that folks aren't in these professions aren't being subjected to an unreasonable amount of images, because they're the ones who have to see everything raw and unfiltered. So I just was wondering if both either Coppa or the sheriff's office locally, what has been done, knowing that this is all still relatively new territory in terms of the footage and the policies being developed. I've been looking at a report to Congress from the Law Enforcement Mental Health and Wellness Act as one body of research, where they're talking about immediate post-incident mental health checks versus recurring mental health checks. Are there peer support programs for the law enforcement side, and then what are the considerations or emerging trends that you might be aware of for the law enforcement oversight side as well? I just wanted to ask if there was any insight into that specific topic.
Okay, thank you, Omar, for your comments. So it looks like we don't have any other hands raised. If there are any questions that any members of the public would like to send over to our panelists, please email them to law.enforcement.auditor@sonoma-county.org. Since there are no more public comment, questions, or hands raised, I think that we can go ahead and just thank our panelists. Thank you so much for attending and for all the valuable information that you shared with us tonight. We really learned a lot, and we'll take that information moving forward for things that we need to address on our end for our community. And I think we can adjourn our meeting. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Good night. And I want to thank you so much for coming. It's late for you guys. It's Central Time. So thank you very, very much for being here. Really appreciate it. Okay, good night, everyone.